Okay, so this morning I'm going to talk through some challenges that are coming to light in this scene that I've been working on, so that maybe both for myself and for anyone who's watching, you can kind of become aware of some of the things that can uh, essentially conspire to make your life difficult. Um, Creating an animation or creating a scene like this, a complex scene with a bunch of sub-X sheets and a bunch of layers, what OpenTunes calls levels, it's a lot like programming. It's a lot like, going into a sub-X sheet is a lot like going into a function. You go in there, you do what you want to do, and as much as possible, you try to keep what's inside of that function or what's inside of that sub-X sheet self-contained. The cardinal sin is for that sub-X sheet to create side effects that become problematic later. I relate it very much to programming because in programming, one of the biggest problems you run into is the question of who's responsible for what. In other words, let's say you have a data structure that has to keep track of a list of a bunch of things. Okay, so in animation software, it might be you might be modeling in software a track object, and within that track is a sequence of images. So you got these images, and as a programmer, you have to decide, are each of those images are they responsible for knowing what track they're a part of? Or is the track responsible for keeping track of the collection of images? Which is it? You can do it both ways, actually. You can have some sort of linked list or something where everything's pointing back to something else, and if you don't have bad memory constraints, you can kind of build redundancy into the software so that you sort of have these checks and balances in place where one's keeping track of the other. But then you have the new problem of those two software components communicating well, because what you don't want is a side effect where something over here changed something down here, and down here isn't aware of it. And so then you have two bodies of data that are now out of sync, which is like the cardinal sin in programming. You really never want to keep your data in two places. You don't want to have copies of your data. You want to have one copy of the data, and everybody else points to it, refers to it, as opposed to keeps a copy of it. Because what you find is when you have two copies of any data, invariably they're going to get out of sync somehow. And this is something I brought up working with OpenTunes over the months, is that there seems to be some pretty apparent ways that data gets out of sync in OpenTunes. So anyway, it's very similar to that. So I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about here. In this scene, first of all, baking the this camera move. Originally, if anybody here recalls, this camera move right here was originally drawn in Blender, and so the actual camera move is baked into the drawings. So if you can understand what this means, that means that we don't have two flat drawings. We don't have flat drawings, and then in OpenTunes there's a 3D camera move. That's not what's going on. What's going on is that the illusion of the camera move is actually baked into the drawings. So if you're zooming into something, what you actually have is a sequence of drawings where it's drawn bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So it looks like you're zooming in, but actually that zoom is, as I say, baked in to the drawings themselves. Well, that was mistake number one. But that's going back quite a while. This whole sequence has actually been it's been really, really educational. So here we have a background, and we can darken that in, and so we can see better what's going on. So problem number one is that we actually had to reproduce the camera move with the background. So as you can see, you've got this drawing of this character. Again, the camera move is baked into the drawings themselves, but for the background that's not true. So then I had to animate the background in such a way that it seems to match. Well, that was difficult actually. It's harder than you might think. Mainly because of keyframe interpolation. So what happens is every few frames things get a little out of sync, and you're constantly having to adjust. You know, in OpenTunes you're going to hit the A key and to animate and adjust the position or the scaling just a little bit. So that's what these keys are. These keys are actually taking the sub X sheet for the Ninja and actually adding another layer of animation data to fine tune it so it actually looks like he's perfectly aligned with this floor, which brings up another problem. If you think about, and I'm sharing these issues with you because if you want to do animation on any kind of serious level, you guaranteed will bump into situations like this. And it is just like programming in the sense that sometimes you get to a point where you go, well, do I take this problem that I have and just put a patch over it? In other words, do I just add another level and paint over the problem and hide it? Or do I step way back and rethink my entire design and maybe start the scene over from scratch? And this scene has been such a great case study for that, because multiple times I've thought, geez, maybe I should just go over this whole thing, just scrap it all and redo it, and I haven't done that. So far I've gotten through it, and when you go ahead and render it all out, basically it looks pretty good. The preview you saw just there didn't have the Ninja's shadow in it, by the way, so there is that thing. There's still quite a few things to address. But getting back to what's the problem? The problem here is, the question is this wall and floor, is it in front of the Ninja or is it behind the Ninja? Just think about that for a minute. Well, it's both. It's in front of his body, but it's behind his hands. So that means that either you're going to break the Ninja into two pieces, or you're going to break the floor into two pieces, maybe more actually, or you're going to fake it. Okay, so how would you do that in practice? Well, if you're going to break the Ninja into two pieces, what you might do is you might have his head and his everything except his forearms, let's say, would be on a level behind the floor graphic. And then his hands would be on a level in front of the floor graphic. So then the question becomes, well, how do you link the two together? Do you link the two together by literally drawing every frame in the perfect position? Or do you use the schematic view to sort of tie one level to the other, and then so that hopefully maybe you could use a maybe the skeleton tool or something like that to link the two levels together, so you can well, actually in practice what I'm talking about doing would probably be easiest with the plastic tool, but that's neither here nor there. So is there another solution? Well, another solution would be you would break the floor into two pieces. That's probably the better idea, actually. Which would mean that you'd create the whole graphic of the floor actually behind him. And then you would take just this little piece of the floor and put it in front of him. So your character is sandwiched between the two. So this is what you see right here is a logistical, believe it or not, it's a worst case scenario. It's the trickiest thing you have to deal with, because it's like it's both in front and behind. That means I gotta have multiple levels, which also means, by the way, that if I have taken my character right here, Okay, so there's my character. If I've taken my character and I've done exactly what I have done, which is I've put him in a sub X sheet for the obvious reason. I want to have his ponytail, his body, his hands, his head. I want to have it all broken up into pieces so that I'm not redrawing and redrawing stuff that I don't need to redraw. Well, the problem is, if the ninja's in a sub X sheet, how do you take that single column and sandwich it between this floor layer? Well, you could do it if you do all your magic with the floor, then it's relatively easy. You would have a layer above and below the sub X sheet. If you're going to do it by the first way I said, which is to break up the ninja into pieces, now you got a problem, because if the floor is one level, now what do? You now have to take the floor and move it into the ninja sub X sheet so that you can sandwich the ninja between the pieces, or vice versa. In the case where I'm talking about, actually you're having to break your ninja up into two pieces, so you've got to go into the sub X sheet where he's already broken into pieces and stick the floor in there and sandwich it in between the correct two levels, which then introduces the next problem. And I'm getting into hypotheticals a little bit here, but you also might have the floor interacting with shadows. Well, if you have the floor interacting with the shadow of the ninja, then clearly there is some advantage to having the floor in the same sub X sheet. What if, again, this isn't the greatest example because we really don't have her interacting with the floor. If she was, then it's even more complicated, because now you have a second character that's a complete sub X sheet all of its own that also has to interact with these components. So what I'm going to say my conclusion is, in terms of how do you deal with these difficulties? Well, I'll show you one reason why it actually is quite difficult. If you look right here in the task manager, OpenToonz is pushing 3 GB of RAM, which means we are perilously close to a crash. Okay, we're perilously close to making OpenToonz have some sort of memory-related crash, because Windows doesn't do super well. Honestly, Windows doesn't do very well with programs that have a memory footprint over 2 GB. So I'm actually surprised it's hanging in there as well as it is. Now, in practice, what I've found is OpenToonz, in terms of dealing with lots of layers and levels and interesting schematic arrangements, like, here you've got certain levels that are parented to others, and if you go and look at the effects, you've got different overlay effects so that things can interact and have the correct blurs and glows and all that kind of stuff. In terms of dealing with the data, OpenToonz does a very, very good job. But again, you're talking about a pretty big memory footprint. So what I'm going to say is that I'm actually glad I'm doing this video, because as I'm talking it through, what I'm seeing is probably the best solution is to do what I'm about to try, which is this. If I was going to rethink this entire scene, the first thing I would do is I would not bake the camera move into the animation. No way. No way. I would always do the camera move as an actual, I'd go into this view and I would have an actual 3D camera move. It would have made everything enormously easier. The reason I made that mistake is because it's also easy in Blender. In Blender, to move the 3D camera and animate, it's no problem. So I just did the camera move and then I rendered it out. So now the camera move is, as I said, it's baked into the images. I would not ever do that again. it just introduces too many problems trying to keep everything synced to the sequence of drawings where there's camera movement. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I would explode all of these sub-X sheets. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to explode them. Now the good news is in OpenToons we can explode our sub-X sheets, which means I can go ahead and turn this into an X sheet that's got a lot of levels. That's the bad news. But by bringing all those levels into the same see, the thing I've tried to avoid is having sub-X sheets with too many columns. And I've done the same thing in Blender, where when I'm working with either grease pencil colors or grease pencil layers, I'm always trying to avoid having too many layers where you've got a list of 37 layers, you know. But I'm actually starting to believe that the cumbersome nature of dealing with all those layers is actually less egregious than trying to bundle them up into either keep everything in a single layer, or in OpenToons bundling everything up into a sub-X sheet. Unless you're crystal clear that there's nothing in that sub-X sheet that's ever going to have to interact with the stuff outside of the sub-X sheet. If that's really clear and you're sure, package it all into a sub-X sheet. In this case, it's not clear at all, because and actually, I mean, look at this. Here I've got up in this corner you can see the icons of the vase. So that means this is a big scene. I mean, this goes, you know, and now here's an interesting thing. Very interesting. For some reason, my character has disappeared. Now let me see. Yeah, so this is like a whole new thing I didn't even expect to bump into today. For some reason, as I get from this sequence to this sequence, my character has completely disappeared. So that's a whole nother problem. I'm going to have to figure out what the heck happened. What did OpenToons... It's probably one of the weakest things in OpenToons, is every once in a while it seems to throw stuff away. But what we've got to do is probably explode the sub-X sheet, because we just keep bumping into too many situations where the stuff inside the sub-X sheet needs to interact with the stuff outside the sub-X sheet. It's a real problem. Okay, so having said that, I'm going to go to right here, and let's just take a look. I want to make sure I know what I'm dealing with here. Okay, so when I turn that off, the ninjas turn off. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go for it here. Here's the thing I'm concerned about. This animation right here, these animation keys, are applied to the sub-X sheet itself. So it's very interesting to see what's going to happen when I explode the sub-X sheet. Where are those animation keys going to go? I mean, which level are they going to attach themselves to? You know, if you've got a sub-X sheet and the animation keys are attached to that sub-X sheet level, well, now if you explode it into, you know, half a dozen or more levels, what do you do with the animation keys? If I was the programmer and I was thinking about this possible eventuality, I would actually keep the sub-X sheet level as just kind of a null level with nothing but the animation data in it. But let's see what happens. So we're going to explode the sub-X sheet. Bring relevant peg bars into the main X sheet, or bring only the columns into the X sheet. Actually, okay, let's take a look and see in the schematic view if we even have peg bars. That's a relevant peg bar. So I'm going to say we probably want to opt for bringing the relevant peg bars into the sub-X sheet. So here we go, folks. We're going to make sure we've got the right column here. This should be very interesting to see what happens. Explode. Bring relevant peg bars. Yeah. Okay, so let's see what happened. Okay. Now, because it was resequenced, it makes me think maybe my animation will start at the wrong place, and indeed that's exactly what happened. Okay. Okay, so that definitely makes life a little more difficult. One piece of good news is I can delete that level that was a guide because now I have the wall. I don't need the red line as a guide anymore. Okay, so it appears, as expected, that that entire sequence is now shifted up to frame 1. Okay, and there it transitions to that guy. So the question then becomes, where the heck is this sequence that represents the beginning? It's probably right here. Indeed it is. Okay. Represents the beginning of the whole shebang. So what I need to do is, first of all, let's take a little breather here for a moment and ask ourselves, where should this be starting? Essentially, that's the mistake I made. And okay, so this is a great example of what can go wrong. You go through all those steps, and then you remember the one thing I should have done is take note of where the sub-X sheet action begins. What frame? I didn't do that. So now I'm having to try to figure it out. Well, that's stupid. So what we're going to do is we're going to hope that OpenTunes will allow us to undo. Okay, it appears that maybe it did. Okay, so let's go over here. There we have Akari. So if you're a normal person watching this, what's interesting about what I'm doing today is this is kind of what separates my audience into two groups, probably, I'm suspecting. Because on the one hand, what we're looking at here is the most boring, utterly uninteresting, tedious aspect of animation that you could. It's like, why would you want to watch this video? Yet, dealing with these sorts of problems, again, if you're trying to go, if you just want to create a trivial 5-second experimental animation just to see if the software lets you do what you want to do, believe me, I've done it a million times. Great, you're no problem. But if you want to do something that's, serious or professional, this stuff that I'm looking at today, which is the most boring thing in the world, is actually the most important thing. Because you're going to bump into it over and over and over again. You're never not going to have these kinds of problems and questions and challenges to deal with. Ever. It comes up repeatedly. Now, what we do want to do is try to optimize the workflow so that we minimize some of the costs of in other words, we want to make as few bad decisions as possible, is what I'm trying to say. Okay, so now what we've done is we've established that frame 92 is where we want to be. Okay, so that's good news. That means we can explode the sub-X sheet. And by the way, it says it's starting in column 11, but this is one of those times when you almost wish they were numbered, and they actually, in addition to their names, they had an accurate numbering system. But okay, so let's go ahead and explode, and we're looking at frame 92 being the important one. Okay, so I suspected, yes, so we need to grab from here. Actually, you know what I think I'm going to do? I'm going to just take, well, wait, I can't Okay, so again, this is where you're going to make a mistake. If I'm not careful, I'm going to make a big mistake. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to open a second X sheet window because I need the screen real estate. To get this right, I really need to be able to see what I'm doing. I need to get the big picture, in other words. Okay, so it looks like I've got two columns called ponytail, and this one is plastic tool, so clearly this is where it starts. And I would say, yes, and that's where it ends. Here's where it ends. So there's a sequence of operations here that needs to be done exactly correctly. Okay, so I'm grabbing the whole group, and then coming up to here, I need to drag the entire group down to frame 92. Okay, so let's just be patient, even though the screen redraws are taking a little longer than you might hope. Okay, there's frame 92. Okay, I was just looking around to make sure that things are, that I didn't like accidentally move it over a column. Okay, so now we have the issue of the keyframes. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to grab this keyframe, which is lower left corner, and this hitting shift key, this keyframe, which is upper left corner. Okay, so it did select them all, and now fortunately, this is a good thing about OpenTunes, I can go ahead and Control X, and then if I come down here to frame 92 and Control V, it's going to fail. Let's try it one more time. Control V did not work. So I need to hit Control X, and now OpenTunes undo system has failed me. Okay, well, maybe not. It looks like we might have gotten, well, okay. Yeah, the undo system didn't quite fail me. Okay, so this is one of those cases where it's, do I need to do the math? Do I need to figure out relative to frame 99 where the last frame would be, so that when I paste it, I actually go to the last frame, not the first frame? Why? Because I'm not working from left to right. I'm working from right to left. In other words, my earliest keyframe is as far to the right as it can go. My latest keyframe. Now, here's an interesting solution to that. Why not go take column 21 here and drag it over to here? Okay. I'm going to call this baked, because this is the sequence that has the animation baked in. So now what that allows me to do is take this. Now I can actually go from left to right, because I don't know if this is a problem for OpenTunes, but I suspect it is. So I'm grabbing all of these keys. Now I can grab the upper left one and drag. Okay, it won't. Okay, now it's dragging. Is it dragging all of them? Nope. I knew it. OpenTunes let you down every time. It's just the programming is just not mature, man. What can you say? It just isn't. Alright, so I'm going to have to hit Control X, and then I'm going to go down to frame 92, because, and this is what's so maddening about OpenTunes, is sometimes this stuff works and sometimes it doesn't. It's just really hard to wrap your head around how it thinks under the hood, what, why certain things work and certain things don't. But I'm going to go to frame 92 and hit Control V, and according to OpenTunes, yes, all my animation data was transferred. So this is good news. This should mean that if I go like this and select all this, and now drag this block down to frame 92, And again, the screen redraw is like super slow. Super slow. Okay. Okay. That got us to where we wanted to be. So now, if we cut back to our other sub-X sheet, now there is of course the possibility it's all going to be like one frame out of sync or something, but okay. So as you can see, the basic, yeah, see, you can see there, it is one frame out of sync. That's okay, that's easy to fix. But so the basic issue that I had, or the concern that I had, did in fact come into play. Okay, OpenTunes has no clue what to do with the animation data that was over the sub-X sheet itself. Okay, so I've got to reproduce that. That's kind of bad news, but on the other hand, that can be done pretty quickly. Okay, so how would you do that? Well, we got to go back to this sequence right here, and let's go. Yeah. So what we're going to do is hit the A key for the animate tool, and we are working on the positioning. And what we're going to do is we're just going to, let's just find a midpoint. It doesn't really matter much because, again, I chose not to sandwich. I'm not sandwiching the ninja around the floor, and I'm not sandwiching the floor around the ninja. I'm doing neither. What I'm choosing to do is fake it, and faking it by having the lines in the right place. You know, it's a legitimate strategy. You can argue whether it's the best in this case, but all that matters is that the movement is convincing, and it all goes by quickly enough that it ultimately doesn't have to be, you know, mega perfect. Okay, this has to be mega perfect. Okay, so we do have an overlap of one frame. So I'm going to go ahead and push that down to there. I'm also going to go ahead and eliminate this column or level. I don't even know why I call them levels. I think that's like a really not the greatest name for it. You know, it's a column and it's also a layer. So I guess that's why the term level is, because it sums up the idea of a column and a layer both in one. Now, one other thing that seems likely, so I'm going to go over here and kill this sub-X sheet, and I want to look at the effects. Because what seems likely is that probably my my shadowing on the ninja is probably lost. So I got to look over here. Sorry, I should probably do this. Okay, so what I'm looking at is there's N1 shadow. So I'm going to grab that and see if I can see in the sub-X sheet where it's been grabbed. Now, this is one of the difficulties of what we're talking about. You know, everything comes at a cost. So I'm gaining myself some benefit by exploding the sub-X sheet and bringing everything into one sub-X sheet, or one X sheet, I should say. I have a lot of levels. That means that the schematic view is becoming increasingly challenging to deal with. So I'm going to just look at, let's do this. Let's do fit to window. Okay, that just scales the window. Render nodes, reset size. That doesn't really help either. Minimize nodes. It's a little bit helpful. Okay, but the bottom line is I'm going to have to be jumping around. Okay. And, okay, so here's the good news. It looks like the over effects, where I had the head and the body linked, and then that multiplied over the shadow. It looks like after exploding the sub-X sheet that OpenTunes preserved that. So kudos to OpenTunes for that one. That's a good thing. So that means when I hit render, yeah, his shadow's still going to be comped over properly. So you do have this little issue right there to address. Okay, so thus far today I've gone for 35 minutes, and again, I can't emphasize enough, this is probably, if all you're interested in seeing is, cool animation or whatever, and there's nothing wrong with that, okay, this is going to be really boring to you. But if you are somebody who wants to do animation and give some thought to the workflow that, makes it possible to do what you're trying to do, I really have to emphasize, you are going to bump into problems like these again and again. If I had to stop everything and make a new rule today, like what's my conclusion in terms of workflow? Number one, I think I said it before, don't ever package things into a sub-X sheet unless you know for a fact that they are standalone. They're not going to have to interact with what's outside of that sub-X sheet. That's number one. And this scene is absolutely a worst case scenario in terms of trying to manage that, because of the baked in camera move, and you've just got so many layers that are partly over but partly under. You run into that with hair. Is hair, if you think about hair on someone's head, is the hair in front of their face or is it behind their face? It's both. It's both. So you either have to draw 2 layers for your hair or more, but I mean, you either have to have multiple layers, some in front, some behind, or you have to actually cut a piece out of the face, right? Line it up just perfect. And those two better not get out of sync, because now you can see the gap, right? So you either have to fake it, which is what I just described, or you got to put you got to have 2 layers. So it isn't as if you're dealing with characters, and obviously if you're dealing with animation, you're probably dealing with characters. You are literally never not going to have to deal with these sorts of creative and logistical choices. So that's really the purpose of the video today, is to squarely face some of those difficult choices and make them, make the choices. How are we going to do it? In this case, my decision was explode the sub-X sheet. Now, I am interested in whether that's affected my memory footprint at all. It's not good. OpenTunes is now reporting 32.9. So, I'm running Windows 8 on this machine. My suspicion is that the explosion gremlins are going to come calling when I get to 4 gigabytes of memory, probably. So, but that's a lot of memory. Okay, so we've got a 1 frame glitch here as well, it looks like. And that glitch, and this is what makes this method of working kind of difficult, is you're constantly having to go through, just scroll through lots and lots of columns like I'm doing here. This is not too unwieldy. I mean, there's probably, gosh, I'm just spitballing here, but I'm thinking there's about 25 or 26 columns. What I found in the earlier scene I was working on, the sequence that you see here, the solution seemed to be, so I was talking about what are the rules. This early sequence was all done as a single X sheet basically up to this point right here. And the way I did it was I packaged each shot. In other words, like this is a shot. Now this is a completely different shot. Completely different shot. Completely different shot. What I did was I made each of them sub-X sheets. But these shots don't interact with each other. Now here in the editing in Vegas, I did go ahead and do a dissolve between them right here. But in terms of my workflow, there was no interaction between these shots. They're all separate entities that just get sequenced together. So, what I'm sharing today kind of explains why this fairly cool sequence that went for a whole minute almost took, and this was when I was learning OpenTunes. So this sequence where I'm learning on the go took about a month to just draw it and to just do everything. It took about a month, which really isn't, in animation terms, is not that long, because I was only working on it for about an hour or two a day. So if you amortize that time over the month, you're really talking about 30 to 40 hours. So actually, for most people, a week. Now, to create a week, or to create 1 minute of relatively finished, polished animation in a week, in Hollywood terms, it's off the chart. If I found some animation studio and I said, give me this, what you see right here, give me this, and I want it done in a month, what's it going to cost me? Now, if you're out there and you're actually one of the really amazing YouTubers who has sat through all this, if you know the answer to that question, let me know. I'd be very curious. What is that 1 minute of animation going to cost me? That took me a week of actual effort. What's that going to cost? I'll bet you that minute right there is probably, I'm just spitballing here, folks, but I'll bet you that minute would cost you between somewhere, this is a wide range, but somewhere between $20,000 and $200,000. I'll bet you that's what you would be quoted. Now, could you get it for less? Yeah, you probably could. But I'll bet you that's what the rate would be, somewhere between $20,000 and $200,000 to do that 1 minute of finished, basically professional quality anime. 200,000 might be on the high side, but it's not going to be under $1,000. I'll guarantee you that. Not even close. Okay, so getting back to the matter at hand, when I did the next sequence with the barrel roll, it was pretty straightforward, so it went relatively quickly. But this sequence here, from here to here, which is 15 seconds, this sequence has taken way longer than the first sequence did. And that's why I'm talking about it today, is because from here to here, I'm actually going to put a marker in there so I remember where this section begins. This sequence is actually 20 seconds. And it starts at 1:07. So yeah, I actually did do 1 minute of animation of actual work time. I did 1 minute of animation in a week. And the second 20 seconds of animation has taken... I've had a lot going on, okay? But I'm going to say what you see here in its horribly unfinished state probably has taken 2 weeks. It's taken at least twice as long to get this 20 seconds correct. And it's not because there's anything more difficult about it per se. It's very much because I just made some poor choices. And so the reason I talk about it today is I want to work it out and talk it out for myself so that I learn and don't make those same mistakes again. So when it comes to sub-X sheets, the problem with this is actually really, really a good study, because what you see here is the lesson is that you would not want to break this up into a sub-X sheet until you get to this point. This is a completely different shot. This could definitely be packaged into a sub-X sheet, and as you see, it already is. So that first 1 minute of animation I was talking about, what actually you had was in the X sheet you would have, let me see here, if I go this way, I'm going left. So I've got to do this in reverse to what the webcam is showing me. So you would go here, and there's a sub-X sheet, and then to the right is another one, and then another one, and each shot was a sub-X sheet, and they were sequenced in order from right to left. So it was a very clean workflow, and it worked well. This shot, and obviously that's also a sub-X sheet already. So this part of it is structured the way I think you would want to structure it. Now we get to here, and the fact of the matter is that everything from here down to here should be its own sub-X sheet. And then here, as I mentioned, for reasons I literally have no idea why, no clue, the drawings of Ninja 1 are gone. They're just gone. And I literally have no idea where they went. Now, if you go back here, you can see this. I did draw it. I'm really not lying. And by the way, this was really kind of hard to do, getting that correct. So now we're getting into actually things you can criticize about OpenTunes. There's no reason why I should have been able to open this, because I haven't gone into the folders that contain the drawings and deleted things, and I haven't done that. So I've opened this project at least a dozen times, never had an issue with this sequence, and now today, for no explicable reason, the drawings are gone. Welcome to OpenTunes. You would think OpenTunes would be saying, hey, I seem to detect that there's some drawings missing. This is what Vegas would do. If you opened a project and say there was an image sequence missing, Vegas would say, hey, boom, there's something missing. Do you want to browse for it? Do you want Vegas to automatically search for it? What do you want to do? What do you want to do? So it would flag the problem and say, let's solve it, and let's solve it right now, which is really good. OpenTunes has kind of committed a cardinal sin in that it has failed silently. One of the rules, this gets back to the analogy between animation and programming. One of the rules of programming is you don't fail silently. That's stupid. You fail loudly. If something goes wrong, you make a really big stink about it. You pop up a window, to warn people, hey, something went wrong. Because otherwise you may well not even, like for example, I could work on this project for another week if I hadn't happened to scroll down to frames, 260 and higher. I could have worked on this for a week and kept resaving it and everything else and never even known or noticed that those images were missing. So whose responsibility is that? In my view, that's the responsibility of OpenTunes. The software should warn you, hey, there's something I can't find here. What's gone wrong? So we'll call that a shortcoming of OpenTunes. Okay, so having said all of that, where are we at? We seem to have a good flow from the initial image sequence to the more complex OpenTunes structure we have here. In other words, from here up, it's just a sequence of drawings down to here. And then here, and you can see the ninja's face changes a little bit, but it goes by so quick I don't think it matters. If we decide it matters, I'll go in and fix it, because frankly, through this entire sequence, his face is only one drawing. It's just one drawing that's animated. So no big deal. So we can always go in and tweak his face if we want to. So basically I'm going to say this is looking pretty good. This sequence I'm fine with. So I guess for today we've kind of solved the problem at hand. Now the one thing we do need to do still here, is we need to give him a shadow. So let me look at this. Okay, it looks like we don't have a shadow through any of this sequence. So there's a cast shadow definitely in order here. Let me see what we have here. Yeah, see, in this sequence we had a shadow, and that's clearly a hand-drawn shadow. And by the way, you can see here how you see how the edge of his body got out of sync with the floor. So, these are things that sometimes, I'm aware of them much earlier, and I let them go because I know they're not going to be difficult to fix, and it's not like I'm not going to notice that at some point along the process. Technically, right here, you can see once it transitions to the seeing his wrap, This is actually a little out of sync. So now I actually already have a keyframe here, so I think what I'll do is I'll just adjust this up and see if that worked. It really didn't. So I'm going to go ahead and put that there. That seems to look good. And then I'm going to make an adjustment here. I'm just going to, on the very next frame. There's an adjustment there. And now let's just go in. Let's get this right while we're here. Okay, so right there, boom, it's out of sync. So this is the price you pay for, you know, the solution is I'm going to fake it. I'm going to actually try to make the lines line up. You're often going to find, okay, you can do that, but now you're going to have to go through and do a lot of massaging the positioning of things. Okay. That looks pretty good. Boom. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take inventory. I'm pushing an hour today already, so I'm sure this video is going to get like 7 views. I can't imagine why anyone would want to watch this, but like I said, I'm doing it because for myself and for you, if you're actually wanting to do animation, what the things we're bumping into are enormously important considerations that will I just can't say it enough. Once you get past doing really trivial animation that's basically got no market value at all, really, and go into actually saying, well, now I'm going to try to create something that's, you know, of professional quality, man, you're going to be bumping into this stuff. Now, another issue we have, by the way, I can see, is that those light beams stopped. Okay, well, let's see if that actually, okay, they're pretty light. You can see right there where they stopped. The problem I think I have is I was thinking maybe those are, nope, they're right here. Okay, so that's good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and extend this just because I can. And I'm going to extend this all the way down to here. It's just for completeness. And I think I'll go ahead and lock that layer so I just can't even accidentally do anything with it. Yep. And when that renders, and you'll notice that I didn't add the beams to the camera move because they're so light. It's just a little tiny gentle effect added on top. Frankly, I could probably delete that level and no one would ever notice. So there we go. Now, is there anything else that's wrong? In other words, we know that once we get to here, there's a lot of work to be done. So the question is, well, is there still a lot of work to be done here? Actually, there kind of is, because number one, we've got to get Ninja 2 sneaking into the shot, because as you can see in this picture, he's kind of hanging like this. So we need to sort of get him up into the corner here without him getting actually kicked in the face when Ninja 2 goes like that. So he's, and you can actually see right there, I started to draw him in there. So that's got to be dealt with. Where is he? Let's find out. Let's go. Nope, that's our guideline, so it must be this one. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and name this N2. N2 means Ninja 2. And so he's got to be dealt with. And then the other thing is, this is actually kind of a big problem, actually. You know, here we have, this is Akari, but her hair is wrong. If I'm remembering correctly, let's see, let's save all just to be safe. Okay, so let's go to Akari sleeping. And as you can see here, her hair is completely different. I mean, like way different. And that's because, Valerie's like, the quality of her hair isn't quite the... Okay, so this isn't quite the level we want it to be. We need to have those varying levels of highlight and stuff. So there's that. So that's got to be re-rendered, and I think there's actually some things about her face as well that were improved. So you can see the hair is different there. Okay, so the good news is to bring everything up to speed is just a matter of re-rendering. The problem is that this hair, if we go back to this shot, if I'm not mistaken, well, okay, she's flipped around, so that means that the short story is that I've got to go into this sub X sheet and completely redo her hair. Okay, so there's that has to be done. So, and it appears, okay, there's very good news. The very good news is that this is only one drawing, literally one drawing that is just animated. So that's awesome. That's good news. That means all I have to do is redraw the hair and put the highlights in there one time, and we're good to go. Okay, so that's cool. So knowing that that's the case, for today, I'm thinking I'm not going to deal with it because I know it's going to really basically be about probably a half hour or so of work to fix it, and then it'll be fixed, and that's that. So what's of more concern at the moment is how I'm going to get Ninja 2 into this shot. You can see again his hair poking up there, so we need to basically animate him into the shot in such a way that it doesn't, he could credibly be struggling to get in while Ninja 1 is making his move. And then when we cut out here, we see him hanging outside the window. So I think that's it. With that, I'm going to say, if you don't like dealing with problems as opposed to actually drawing and creating animation and keyframes and all that stuff, then I apologize. This video has not been a fun one. But for dealing with the realities of animation workflow, it's been extremely important. So there it is. And with that, I sign off for today.